Welcome to Inspired Living with Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Every Wednesday, Marc, along with his special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Marc will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Marc is a tested, certified, and professional spiritual medium, metaphysical teacher, healer, and spiritual advisor with a spiritual practice based in Seattle, Washington. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be in this beautiful, transformative, awakening planet of ours. This is another episode of Inspired Living. I am your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, and today is going to be a fun show, y'all. This show will not disappoint. A lot of times when we do our shows on ufology, UFO, UAPs, first contact, the downloads on whatever podcasting platform you follow, Inspired Living gets lots of downloads, and today is going to be no different. And how would humanity transform if aliens did contact Earth? If we encountered alien life, how would we react to that? You know, I remember reading a book by the great Carl Sagan, great astronomer, and his novel was called Contact. And he brings out aspects that I most admired about Dr. Sagan's humble suggestion that communication with an alien race would compel mankind to reassess its internal conflicts and prejudices. And today we're going to welcome a special guest. Caroline Cory has never been on the show. This is her first time. So we're really excited to have her talk with us about her award-winning film. She's a best-selling author. It's called A Tear in the Sky, and it's a documentary. And it's going to take us on an unprecedented scientific, metaphysical, historical, inspirational, and I would even say spiritual, deeper perspective in the UAP, UFO phenomenon. Now, UAP, maybe that's a term you haven't heard before. That's the government's new, acronym for what we've all called UFOs for over 75 years. It stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, so we're going to be exploring that here. So I'm going to read a little bit about Caroline Cory's background as a writer, director, and producer. But I just want to say, for those of you that follow the show, thank you so much for being an inspired listener. We have inspired listeners from all around the planet. We love to say, be inspired, inspire others, inspire before we expire, because that is part of the journey, part of the soul adventure. And as a spiritualist myself, I've had a direct experience off the coast of Puerto Rico. I did a whole podcast on about a year and a half ago with my first contact with a UAP when I was in the U.S. Coast Guard. I've talked about that. I've predicted for over 3 years and forecasted that we will start to have first contact and full disclosure. Yesterday there was a public hearing. We're going to talk about that. That's been the first public hearing on UFOs and UAPs in over 50 years. We did not time this. Caroline this just happened to be the date that was open that Caroline agreed to come on. So the timing is perfect for all of this. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, grab a cup of tea as we explore UAPs, UFOs, and A Tear in the Sky documentary film. I promise you it'll be educational, inspiring, and very, very spiritual. So Caroline Cory is an award-winning filmmaker and the visionary author of the best-selling books on consciousness, science, and energy medicine. Right in my wheelhouse. I love all that stuff. As a child and throughout her life, Cory has had numerous UFO encounters, as well as ESP, which we call extrasensory perception, and precognitive experiences. So seeing something, precog is knowing something before it happens, which led her to become deeply connected to the existential topics of the study of consciousness and the mechanics of the universe. After teaching energy medicine and conscious work for over a decade, Cory founded Omnium Media, an entertainment and media platform that tackles various thought-provoking topics on the human condition and the nature of reality. In addition to writing and producing, Cory appears regularly as a guest on supernatural phenomenon and the science of consciousness at major conferences and television shows. You can reach this new documentary. It's called atearinthesky.com. Just go to that www.atearinthesky.com. And with that, Caroline, welcome to Inspired Living.
Hey, Mark. Thanks so much for having me. This is awesome.
It is. It's fun. It's enlightening. It's inspiring. A lot of your work, I'm right in that same wheelhouse, and a lot of stuff that I look at from, not just metaphysics, but from a scientific standpoint, the scientific method. Ufology is one of history's oldest conspiracy theories because it just seems to keep working its way back into our consciousness. So let's talk about this film because you have an opening dialogue with the wonderful Captain Kirk William Shatner, who just recently went to space as a tourist. How it's just weird to say that, to be honest with you. But you can catch the opening of the documentary over on YouTube, and let's talk about A Tear in the Sky, and let's just get right into this.
Yeah, so I've been interested in all sorts of mysteries, because of my personal experiences. So I was in the field of consciousness and all sorts of, like you were saying in my bio, all sorts of contact experiences that happened spontaneously since I was 5 years old. And so, of course, after studying and researching the subject for a very long time and working with so many people, you come to a validation. You start to get validation after validation. So you see something and it happens, or you know of something and it is accurate. How does that work, Mm-hmm. So then because of that, I started working with scientists to see, okay, well, can we validate any of this? Can we actually measure the effect of the interaction of consciousness with the physical world? So this is kind of how it all began, working with scientists to basically I realized that what I was doing is trying to make a paranormal topic normal, bring validation, measurability, so to speak. And so it was kind of the same for the UFO subject. What happened, especially with the timing, what's happening for those who have been paying attention to that subject, the last couple of years with the Navy releasing these strange-looking tic-tac-like objects above their ship, then the Navy and the Pentagon saying, yes, it is an anomaly. We don't know what it is. It's a UFO, UAP. I thought the timing is perfect for this film, A Tear in the Sky. And so, but again, instead of just rehashing some of the, like you were saying, conspiracies or stories, I wanted to continue on the same kind of style of, bringing science into the picture. And so that's how I decided to make this film and set up an expedition. Instead of studying what's already out there scientifically, I thought, wait a minute, no one's ever done anything like this before. I'm going to go out and gather scientists and experts and technology folks and Navy people, actually, and see if we can capture something on camera, but not just cameras, but multiple devices across the devices, do correlations, do it scientifically. What happens? And of course, we'll talk about the details, but we were blown away by the amount of things we found. And so Captain Kirk, as we were doing this very scientifically and, gathering all this data, at one point I was like, wait, what's happening right now with the congressional hearing yesterday and everything the reports that have been released. I thought this is becoming very mainstream. I mean, we need to be having these conversations with, our family members who don't believe in it, and the neighbors who roll their eyes. It's this time. We are at this juncture. So I wanted to, in addition to the science and the data, I thought of inviting William Shatner because obviously he's he's a legend. He's an icon in the sci-fi, the space travel. I mean, that's what he represents. And because he truly he wasn't acting, he was being himself. He really offered that additional kind of human like bridging the gap between sci-fi and the science that we were doing, and it was really phenomenal to have him, kind of bridge the gap to the mainstream with a topic such as ufology.
Yeah, and he's gone to space. I mean, I watched the whole thing with Blue Origin and how he went up to space for 3 minutes, floated around, and came back down. I mean, how cool is that? That you're talking to somebody that's actually been up in orbit, who represents James T. Kirk, famous Star Trek captain, and now talking about this documentary where we are trying to make this more mainstream. Like I said, I've had a personal encounter. I wasn't as young as you. I was actually in the U.S. Coast Guard when I had my first experience off the coast of Puerto Rico, which we call the tip of the Bermuda Triangle, which actually has a high frequency of UAPs and UFOs. But when I realized we were doing this show today, I was like, we just timed this to a congressional hearing to the intelligence community from the Department of Defense and experts out in the public, unclassified, for us to hear that, yes, there is something out there that is not our technology. It defies the laws of gravity. It defies the laws of physics. It's technology we have no idea, so they're looking at it from a national security standpoint, which makes sense from a government perspective. But it goes against this tic tac that has received a lot of press and publications, from 60 Minutes to this documentary. People may not realize, but that tic tac event happened a while ago. It was only just released, the video of it. And the acknowledgement by the pilots off the carrier, I want to say 2004, but it's been a while since this actually occurred. So we've had several years to where we probably have a lot more information out there. But for those listeners that are listening today, Caroline, where can they find the film if they want to watch it? I know it's subtitled in both Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Dutch. Where besides iTunes and Vimeo, is it streaming anywhere else that people can go get this documentary and watch it for their own?
Yeah, they can get it on Amazon and iTunes, but probably the best way is just to go to atearinthesky.com, and they'll see all the links there for the platform of their choice.
Yep, and we have that A Tear in the Sky on our Facebook page as well. And how long did it take you to put this film together?
Like a couple of years. It's funny because my previous film was called Superhuman, and it was more about the human abilities, the connection of consciousness with the physical reality. And I was originally going to do part 2 of that film, the sequel, kind of. And all of a sudden, I had this inspiration. It's like, no, go and do this UFO movie. It just came out of nowhere. Of course, you and I know it comes from the higher guidance, but
Sure.
So it just happened a couple of years ago, but it was so guided because I had the idea before Christmas sometime, and then by March, everything was kind of in place. We had the location, we had the team, we had everything just happened. The production company, everything was in place in such a short time. For people who know filmmaking, this is like very, very fast. And by July, we were filming already. So, and this is not a small production. I mean, you saw, people can see it even in the trailer. This is a big production. Yeah. Even in the trailer, people can see this is a big production. I mean, we had multiple cast members, a huge amount of devices. I mean, this is really very, very an impressive kind of display of devices to figure out how to film, what each one does, And then we were in 3 simultaneous locations because we were trying to achieve triangulation to get the data, from a triangulation point of view, which is also scientific, which also has never been done. So it was a big, extensive production from a filmmaking point of view, and everything came together literally in a few months. And by July, we were filming. So it's really like record speed. Just to tell you that it was kind of meant to be.
And I love it, and I hope more people get eyes on it. How did you come up with the title? Just curious.
Again, what is so funny is I called it A Tear in the Sky a couple of years ago before we went out to film it, and because I believe that first of all, we don't really understand a lot of our reality, the fabric of our own space-time and things like that. I feel and I believe there is within the fabric of our space-time, within the magnetic field actually around the atmosphere, around the planet, there are nodes, there are places, people call them hot spots, but and there's where the magnetic field is kind of concentrated, where it kind of gets warped, like where light is bent and the gravity kind of changes. So I believe that there are those specific spots that allow certain things to happen, meaning certain things appear, disappear, or behave very strangely. So I'm fascinated. I talked a lot about this subject for years and years in my books and everything else. And so I was thinking we're going to do a UFO movie. I'm assuming they're going to be, if we see them, when we see them, they're going to have something to do with that opening, that tear. And so I called it A Tear in the Sky 2 years ago. And of course, sure enough, people will see it in the film. At the end of the film, we end up discovering some sort of opening, which is, again, totally historic. It's an opening and closing and objects coming out of it. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, so the tearing of the space-time continuum, terror, T-E-A-R, not terror of something to be fearful of. It's not the terror of frightening people, because, again, I believe they're here to reveal themselves. And we're going to go to our first break here, but when we come back, we're going to pick up, because I see that you're also working with the military personnel that I just watched on Skywalker Ranch, so their equipment. So we'll come back in 2 minutes and talk about that. Today's special guest, Caroline Cory, award-winning documentary filmmaker, A Tear in the Sky. We'll be back here in just a few minutes.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Hello, listeners. We hope you're enjoying the shows here on OMTimes Radio. Marc Lainhart here, and host of Inspired Living Radio. And I'd like to invite you to my morning show of inspiration, encouragement, healing, motivations, transformations, and discovering that diamond within. Metaphysical Mocha Mondays every Monday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, over on the Intuitive Prospector Facebook page and my YouTube channel, Soul Adventures. Dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing a job
and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungeringAmerica.org, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to Inspired Living. Our special guest today, award-winning filmmaker and best-selling author Caroline Cory, has joined us. Thanks, Caroline, for joining us to discuss this very interesting, fascinating, mystical, spiritual. There's just so many labels that you can put to this as we discuss her new documentary film, A Tear in the Sky. And not to give too much away, but you go check this film out. We kind of were just talking about the ending. But before the break, I was looking from a quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he talked about perhaps we've never been visited by aliens because they have looked upon the Earth and decided there's no signs of intelligent life. And you know, with everything going on in our planet right now, it's just interesting that the timing of UAPs, UFOs is really starting to gain traction. I know that, you know, Carl Sagan, you know, after I read his book Contact, you know, years ago, he speculated that any kind of extraterrestrial message or just, you know, what we call, you know, full disclosure, first contact would have an effect on revealing to mankind the folly of its divisions against itself. And if you look at the world right now, Caroline, there's a lot going on in our world. Divisions, war, uncertainties, the planet. What better time than now to realize that we're not alone in this, you know, universe that's mathematically incomprehensible?
Yes, definitely. The timing is so interesting, and it feels like the government's been kind of preparing preparing us for something. Because it kind of started a couple of years ago with those Navy videos that leaked, and then one report. Yeah, and then one report after another. That latest report was crazy, talking about the effects of coming in contact with a craft and even abductions, and now the congressional hearing. I mean, they're definitely they want us to pay attention to that subject. Why?
Yeah.
There's a whole different, conversation. I'm sure there's all kinds of agendas, but to be honest, it doesn't matter because whatever, the political agenda is, because the idea is, the positives is that it is becoming more credible to the general public, more accessible, more, less ridicule. You can just go out and just talk about it now. And like you were saying, we're going through so much right now since the pandemic and wars, and everything is coming out to the surface. So even though, to me, it feels like this chaotic reality we are living in right now, but it feels like this is a moment of truth. It's almost like everything comes out in our face so that we can face it already and say, we think it's alien, we think it's no. It is this. It is happening. There is division, there is war. It's almost like when you want to heal something, you have to bring everything from the subconscious to the conscious. That's the first step in healing, So I think everything that, we've been struggling with as a society has always been there. All these problems have been there. And I think now with all of these stories, from the pandemic to everything else, to the wars and now these types of discussions, it's like it's kind of finally coming into our face so that we can face it. We can say, it's not like we think there's a conspiracy or we think, it's all there for us to look at and to heal. So that's why I feel the timing of this topic is part of the bigger picture of the truth that, hello, we're not alone in the universe. Let's look at this subject seriously. One of the important subjects we need to look at and figure out what that is about and how we fit within the larger picture. How, what is our purpose within the larger picture of the universe?
Yeah, exactly. And for our listeners out there and those of you that have followed my work for the last few years, I call it the drip, drip, drip technique, where it's been slowly dripping out, 2017, the first videos were actually released. And a lot of people don't realize that that video was released not because of what was on the video. It's because the government actually was more concerned about the technology tracking of the objects than anything else from a national security standpoint. And then last year in 2021, just around this time last year, June 25th, the Pentagon released a 9-page unclassified report. I've worked for government for years, and the government never usually puts a report out unless there's something there. Now that's the unclassified version, so we know that there is a classified version still sitting out there that we have not read. But what's interesting, Caroline, is I always say follow the money when it comes to this as well, because now we have an actual Space Force, which branched off from the Air Force, just like the Air Force branched off from the Army based on history and technology. So we have a Space Force. We have the James Webb Telescope that's 1 million miles out there, pointing and ready to be focused in to tell us, what's out there from a deeper perspective that we've never seen before. I found it interesting that NASA just called together a council of 24 theologians to discuss what happens to society, what happens to the world if we do indeed, release information that we are not alone in the universe. And it's pretty arrogant to think that we would be the only ones in the universe. But I always say follow the press. It doesn't get front page news. It's that 9-page, 10-page news where you're like, well, why did NASA hire 24 different theologians from different religions around the world to debate and to offer perspective of what happens from a religious standpoint if ufology is in fact confirmed to be real, scientific, and no longer a conspiracy theory fringe type of approach? That would be very transformative for our planet. And our planet right now is probably at one of the most transformative awakening times that I've seen in my lifetime. So on the film itself, I noticed that you were working with ex-military personnel, not just scientists, but the military personnel. Now, I just saw them because I watched a television series on the History Channel called The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch, which dates back to the ranch in Utah, going all the way back to indigenous times and the indigenous people that talked about the skinwalkers. And I noticed that they are in this documentary. So let's talk about how you're tracking this, because it's not just what you see with the physical eye, because close encounters of the first kind, what I've experienced, is something that you spot in the sky and it really leaves no evidence. It's just an unidentified aerial phenomenon or flying object. The second kind, kind is where a UFO leaves some sort of physical trace, burns on the ground, broken branches, metadata that records a spike in data. And then, of course, the third kind is where you make contact with a UFO, which some of these pilots with this Tic Tac, the way that it flies, they've had encounters, and that's close encounters of the third kind. Something Spielberg, wrote about in the late 70s with the famous film that, I think was handed down to him, to be honest with you. But let's talk about your film.
Yeah, so I actually stumbled on Kevin Day. He was the first one when I had the idea for the movie. I wanted to I was looking for scientists actually, and as we were researching, we stumbled on Kevin Day, who was the radar operator in 2004 on the USS Princeton. So he was the first one to have caught the Tic Tac UFO that leaked. And so that triggered a whole chain of events since then. So I found him first, and as I was talking to him, he said, wait, I have been wanting to do a sort of a scientific investigation. Basically, for him, it was a sense of retribution. It's like he wants to prove that he wasn't crazy, because that incident literally shattered his whole life. He lost his career, he lost his friends, his family, because of the ridicule. And so he's been wanting, so he's been wanting to do something like this for a while, and he had already gathered a few scientists and experts on his team. So I thought, maybe, even though they hadn't really done an expedition together quite yet, but they were already, as a team. So I thought, maybe we can work with them, especially it kind of made sense having them, the military, as part of the story, because I mean that's how it all began, you know. And I was able in the movie to weave in their human story into the whole science expedition thing and the real hardcore data that we got. So I felt it was a perfect balance to have the real story kind of materialize, you know, in this film in this way. And so, and I felt like through the film, they were able to kind of come full circle, like, see, we weren't crazy. Here's the evidence. And, you know, people will see it in the film. But even in the trailer, you can see some of the objects that we captured look very similar to the Tic Tacs he saw in 2004. And also other ships, USS Omaha, USS Kidd, all in the same area. They saw these strange-looking Tic Tac-like objects. So for us to set up this expedition and go, you know, for 5 days and capture similar things, that was pretty incredible. Like, do you call it a coincidence or whatever?
Synchronicities,
yeah. And then we captured even other very, very interesting, I mean, people will see it, how we did all of this, but some of the objects were literally raining down, falling in the water. So very similar to what he's describing in 2004. So because of that, it brought the film to a whole new level, like it's not just the hardcore scientific data that people will be able to see, but also the story, how it all starts and how it comes full circle.
Yeah, and if you go to terrainthesky.com, you can click on the crew page, and it's very impressive. Everything from astrophysicists, you got Travis Taylor, you've got theoretic physics, you've got a professor of physics, science and technology consultant, ex-military, including colonels. It's a very impressive cast, and I think that's important because it gives the perspective from those that have had the experience like myself. And when you're in the military culture, just like, when 60 Minutes aired and had, that interview with the 3 pilots, which these pilots are the top of their game, very educated, very smart. And, to receive that ridicule in that environment, that group think of when you're in the military, I experienced the same thing off the coast of Puerto Rico. We know that there was something there. Our radar hit it. We didn't ever, there was about 6 of us that saw it, but we didn't really talk about it because of the ridicule and the, put on a tinfoil hat and the conspiracy theories that goes along with it. So it's really nice to see those that have had the experiences coming out and, again, using the scientific method to show, without a shadow of doubt that there is something, that is there, that's observing, that's tracking, that's interacting with us. I always remind my listening audience with the shows that I do, just because you don't see it with the physical eye does not mean it's not there. You can use gravity. You can talk about the wind. You can talk about rainbows. We know they all exist, but you don't see them all the time. And, the same could be with, ufology and UAPs and UFOs is there's a technology, just like yesterday's briefing, they released new video of that little ball that went right by the plane traveling at a very fast speed that actually defies the laws of physics, from a pilot standpoint. And they couldn't answer what it was. I mean, the senators were pressing them pretty hard to say, okay, what is it that we're looking at? We don't know. Right? So it was, if you didn't catch that hearing yesterday, and it's out there now, it's streaming on all, media channels, but it was about an hour. I watched it. It was fascinating. And there's obviously something, the timing of all of this, even with our episode today, this was not planned. This was not timed, but here we are talking about it with your new documentary, yesterday's hearing, the report from last year, the James Webb Telescope that's about to go online next month. It's like they're preparing us to let us know that, yep, we're not alone. And I hope we do, because hopefully that will change our world and bring that evolution that, as Rumi talked about, as what the caterpillar saw the end of the world, the butterfly, saw it at the beginning of the world. And that's kind of where I'm approaching this from. Not doom and gloom and, apocalypse and the end of the world, but something that's more enlightenment and evolution of our species and who we are. And maybe we can stop this divide and this war and this, this misery down here on the planet that we're going through.
Yes, definitely. And also, very recently, they were showing the first video, a picture of the black hole. They were saying,
I saw
did
that.
you see that as well? Yeah.
I did.
It's so interesting, the timing of all of this. Like, I mean, so I'm really enjoying this because, again, I mean, we couldn't have timed this better, the film, but also with everyone from NASA to Congress, talking about the subject. It's just time. It's like enough already. That we, a lot of your audience and knows, and you know for sure that it's impossible for us to be the only ones. Really, like, I mean, look around the hundreds of. Yeah. It's like they would be pretty sad. But just think about the intelligence behind creation or existence or reality itself. I mean, even on this one planet, you see the hundreds of breeds of animals and plants and trees and fish and all kinds of,
potential.
Potential. And then you have one intelligent species, like such as humans, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, and then there's like billions and billions of stars and planetary systems and galaxies, and so it just doesn't make sense that even mathematically that it would be just the human species in this giant universal creation, So I think it's really, we're living a historic turning point in the human evolution, that we're finally accepting and awakening to the fact that not only we're not alone in the universe, but we're all connected to all aspects of life.
Yeah, I agree with you. So we're going to cut to our second break. We'll be right back here in just a few minutes with our special guest, Caroline Cory, talking about her new documentary, A Tear in the Sky. Stick around. You don't want to miss what's coming up. We'll be back here in just a few minutes of Inspired Living Radio.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Have you wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
One planet, 7.3 billion people, only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Marc's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Marc's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marclainhart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
If I could be you.
And you could be me.
For just 1 hour.
If you could find a way.
To get inside.
Each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
And welcome back, everyone. Today's special guest, Caroline Cory, award-winning filmmaker and best-selling author, A Tear in the Sky. She is talking about this new documentary that you can get through iTunes or through Amazon, Vimeo. There's a couple different ways. The best way to get there is atearinthesky.com. That'll break down the cast, the crew, the updates, how you can contribute to the documentary. And, you know, a couple quotes that I was just looking on during the break, because I firmly believe Albert Einstein, who's been talking about this kind of stuff from, you know, hotspots, vortexes, portals, energy, frequency, vibration. I'm not convinced that Einstein was actually from the planet Earth. But, you know, there's a quote from Buzz Aldrin, who was the second man on the moon. And just a little history for you, Caroline. I'm actually related to Neil Armstrong. He is in the family. He is the family tree of the Armstrong family in my family tree. So I believe I'm like a fourth cousin to Neil Armstrong. But first man on the moon who Buzz was hanging with, and he talked about there may be aliens in our Milky Way galaxy, and there are billions of other galaxies. The probability is almost certain that there is life somewhere in space. And to even further it, Stephen Hawking talked about, I believe alien life is quite common in the universe, although intelligent life is less so. Some say it is yet to appear on planet Earth. And, you know, for our listeners out there, if your, you know, belief system, you know, religion, how you were raised, what you've seen in Hollywood movies, it really is, I just remind people, for our listeners out there, is to take the ocean test. The ocean is 70% of the part of the planet. If you just take a glass of, just an empty glass, and you dip it down into the ocean, you're probably not going to get anything. Maybe some algae, maybe you'll get maybe a crab, something small. But we know for a fact that there are whales, there are dolphins, there are octopus, there is billions and billions of different life forms in our ocean. But just because we don't capture it with the glass, when we dip our glass in any part of the ocean, you know, doesn't mean it's not there. It's just that's the representation of what our universe, that's how big our universe is. We have just yet to actually capture that. But I do feel, and I predicted and forecasted that in our roaring 20s will change, and we will have first contact, and the James Webb Telescope will tell us more. What you've captured in this documentary based on the scientific method, the different frequencies. During the film, Caroline, what really kind of stood out to you for our listeners? Like, what's some moments, some aha moments, like, oh my gosh, I can't look at the world the same way with the same eyes now that I've seen this?
Yeah, I want to back up a quick second, Mark, because I love the comment you made about the ocean. You know, what a great way of looking at it. And so I just wanted to kind of add to this that, you know, the fact that you didn't catch anything in your water, like you were saying, doesn't mean dolphins and all the life forms aren't out there. Mm-hmm. But the water itself is the common denominator. And it doesn't stop at the glass. Does that make sense? It's kind of like that should give us clues to the potential of other life forms. And so anyway, I just wanted to say I was listening to you and thinking, wow, what a great way of looking at it. It's so good to keep your understanding of the potential of life. But yeah, so making this film, it was very difficult in a lot of ways, especially logistically. And I was working with real hardcore scientists, meaning, you know, nuts and bolts, you know, we're not into consciousness and intention or anything like that. So let's keep it very clear and measurable. And it was fine because that aspect had never been done in ufology, and that's what I wanted to bring in this film. It was okay. Yeah. But what was fascinating to me is certain things we caught in real time, but we had our devices running 24/7, and so we weren't always able to see everything, every single thing in real time. So some of the things we would discover right after, as we were going through the footage frame by frame. And I have to say, the there are a couple of events that were the most striking to me, that I felt like in that moment, it's like, it's a feeling of, I did it. I don't know how to describe it. It's a sense that you're not going to be able to refute this. It's practically impossible to refute this. And it just gave me that additional sense of accomplish. Of course, it's just still the beginning of a huge conversation, but a sense of accomplishment, again, that I haven't had until now, and that was where one of the objects that we found was, it literally appeared on the FLIR camera. And just also to repeat what you said, sometimes we're looking at the sky and we don't see anything, but if you have the equipment, which is the FLIR cameras, I'm talking military grade FLIR, each camera is like $50,000, and we had 8 of them, I mean, it's that sort of, and so you're looking into the infrared range in a much, much more detail. So it's invisible to the naked eye, but when you capture it through this device, literally there's one object that appeared out of nowhere, it tilted, it rotates, and then it disappears. So you can see the actual shape of the object, and then it just disappears. And then it registers cold, because the FLIR camera is a thermal camera. It tells us the temperature of the object you're studying. And that was like, what? We don't know of any propulsion system that would do that.
On the planet, that wouldn't give off an exhaust, or a drone, or anything aeronautical. It would have to give off some sort of exhaust or some sort of signature, but for it to be up there just hovering and be cold, that's not known technology on the planet Earth as of right now.
Yeah, because there's always some sort of friction, So that was like, wow, that was that moment. And of course, because again, I have not seen anything like this out there, and so that gave me that wow moment, like you're talking about. And then of course, the very last thing, which we don't want to give away completely, but just because I like people, it's not just to be a teaser, but just like it's good to see how the story unfolds, and how we come to these conclusions. But of course, at the end, the famous tear, which we think it's some sort of a wormhole or warp in space-time, when we realized that the things that we were inside or coming out of it were actual physical objects, reflective objects. That was like, what? So yeah, I mean, this film did a lot for me, just, even though I'm the filmmaker, but and that's what I'm hoping it will do for others.
It's being recognized too. You've gotten a lot of awards already. If you go to the main page, you can see all of the, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's like 10 different, recognitions. So it's resonating, right? And that's important for society, for consciousness, for, people, to, connect with it, but not be fearful of it, right? Because there's a lot of fear that can go into this, and what you've seen in a Hollywood movie. And from my perspective, if they've worked through their aggression, they've worked through their technology. If they were here to be, what you would see in a Hollywood movie, they would have done it during our nuclear age back in the 40s and 50s. And so it just tells me that they're observing us with all of these UAPs. And, as humans, we're 2- and 3-dimensional beings. But if we start thinking broader, which science shows us that the brain can actually connect to 12 different dimensions, 12 different frequencies, then you start thinking about these extra dimensional beings, extraterrestrial beings, and who knows, maybe it's us in the future that have just far advanced, and we're coming back saying, hey, humans, get your act together, because we want a future for where we're going to be. Who knows? There's so many questions to this. But, for our listening audience out there, A Tear in the Sky is definitely just right along the lines of great documentary films that are really bringing to light from a scientific method, from a scientific approach, for your skeptical mind, for those, the debunkers out there saying, oh, we're the only species. Give it a go. Check it out, and then see if it changes your mindset or how you see the universe. Because the one thing we've always looked up, one thing we've always done as humans is always looked up. We've always looked to the stars, whether that's to navigate or to start traveling. That's our next great adventure. So, Caroline, it's been a lot of fun. I'd love to have you back on the show if you're open to it, to continue, because like I said, the hour goes by so very quick. But this was released earlier, May 3rd, 2022. So make sure to check that out. You can even go over to YouTube and check out the trailer with Captain Kirk, which is really cool. But what would you like for our listeners to know about this documentary, or any other perspective or thoughts that you have before we close the show?
Yeah, I mean, for folks who are into ufology, this is definitely never seen before that everybody should check out. But for the folks who are still new to this, or who would say, well, how does that relate to my daily life? I mean, why is it important for me to know that UFOs are real and this and that? How is that helping me? So I think it's what this film does on a consciousness level. It brings that sort of, again, this validation that it is not a paranormal subject, that reality is multidimensional. And so it brings that sort of proof, and so for the folks who are trying to figure out how their guidance work, or how to bring healing, or how to manifest this or manifest that, it brings that sort of bigger picture, especially with the science within it, that hopefully will empower them. Will say, you know what, I know I can tap into these other realities, these other dimensions, without fear, because it is being shown, it is being measured and proven. And so I'm hoping that it will do that for those folks as well. It is about empowerment and bringing the truth.
Mm-hmm. And I think, from the perspective of this little pale blue dot that Carl Sagan talked about, is once we realize we're not alone in the universe, that changes everything. If you think about it, medicine, technology, travel, philosophy, religion, and like I said, NASA brought together 24 theologians to pay them to talk about, okay, what does society do? So yeah, for that listener out there that's like, well, how does UFO really impact my life? It can impact your life in a couple different ways, right? Based on global transformation. And I know Deepak Chopra was talking about, global transformation is usually preceded by great chaos. And I look at where we're at on the planet today, and we're just filled with great chaos here in the United States, the pandemic, the war, those are just kind of the big three, and the breakdown of systems and politics. And it's like, okay, maybe we are building up to something, to this great reveal. And for our listeners out there, I go back to 1977 when Spielberg, named his film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which he only paid $1,000 to borrow the phrase to use in his movie. But that first kind, many people around the world have had a first kind. They've seen something in the sky and it leaves no evidence. Second kind leaves some sort of physical trace. Third kind is they've made contact, an interaction like what we've seen in the reports. Fourth kind, they talk about interactions, aka aliens kidnapping us, which I'm not sure I'm a big believer of. And then, of course, the fifth kind is where we're actually having regular conversation with aliens. Think Star Trek, Spock, the Federation, everything that, movies. But it really does become, are movies a reflection of reality, or is reality a reflection of movies? And is science fiction in our Roaring '20s going to become science fact? I think it is, and I think that this documentary is going to help portray that, of what we once thought as science fiction, everything that Gene Roddenberry, who was a seer, by the way, for our listeners out there, he was a seer, consciousness, and could see into, projected futures. That's where he started to write about Star Trek, and it's going to be awesome to see science fiction slowly turn into science fact, backed up by the scientific method. So check out this award-winning documentary. Caroline Cory, thank you so much for being on the show. I like to ask my guests when they're on for the show for the first time, what or who inspires you, before we close?
Oh my God.
Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, right?
But to put you on the spot.
Yeah. I mean, so to me, I want to kind of say something very human, but my inspiration still comes from the beyond. I mean, because I did have my connection at a very young age, since the age of 5, I have this kind of very strong connection to what I call source. And I feel like I always go back to that place to kind of be inspired as to what is my role, what is my next chapter, what is my purpose here. So even though I do get inspiration from different people who are here on earth doing amazing things, but I feel that's really the source of my heart inspiration.
I love that. Good stuff. I wish we had another hour. I could geek out for 4 hours on all of this stuff, because I think it is transformative. But, as Carl Sagan said, the universe is not required to be in perfect harmony with human ambition. And I do believe as we move forward with the James Webb Telescope, even NASA has said that within 24 hours after the James Webb Telescope goes live, they can tell us that we're not alone in the universe. So we'll just have to wait and watch, as I always like to say. Caroline, thank you so much for being on the show. A true inspiration, and good luck with your documentary, A Tear in the Sky.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, everybody. Until our next soul adventure together, be kind, caring, and compassionate. And most importantly, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within. We'll see you next time for Inspired Living. Namaste.